Well, let's get to our panel right now. Joining us for more from London via Skype, Ammar Waqqaf is Managing Director of the Syria-focused think tank Gnosos. Also in London, Alexander Nekrassov is a former advisor to the Russian government. From the US state of Massachusetts, Kaveh Afrasiabi is a political scientist and expert in Iran's foreign affairs. And with me here in the studio is Paolo von Schirach, who is the president of the Global Policy Institute. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Ammar Waqqaf, let me start with you. What do we know about this chemical weapons strike in Duma? The assumption is that it was a government strike, but do we know any more? And do you know any more about any kind of response from the Syrian government forces in anticipation of a possible strike?
Well, let me answer the latter question first. We understand that there are certain measures that are being taken, precautionary measures, of movements of the Syrian army in order to reduce casualties and cost should an airstrike or a strike by the United States, France and the United Kingdom come or materializes. As for the chemical attack, we've seen the videos, I think all of us have, although there isn't much to it other than the video. There aren't names, there aren't real count of casualties and so on and so forth. And there was a video that was circulated a couple of days back of a Russian military police vehicle with some officers heading towards that place. The reporter is a Syrian opposition reporter. He's stationed in Duma. So he, is not going to be kind to the government anyway, and he was trying to say, these are people coming to investigate the place. And from the looks of it, the Russian officers didn't have any chemical warfare gear or gas masks or, suits. And they just went up there expecting really, apparently, to see it and to find nothing. They didn't care about their own safety. So probably it's more of a myth than a reality. We've seen it before, that, people use videos, use whatever it is to incite foreign agents, so to speak. And probably this is one of them.
But this could lead to a confrontation in the Middle East. Alexander, tensions have been rising between the United States and Russia and other Western countries for quite some time now. The Americans are getting ready to strike. The Russians have said they will counter-strike. President Trump has issued a tweet in which he says Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. What is one to make of this warning to Russia?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we are no longer talking about Syria here. We are talking about the standoff between America, the West, and Russia. Now, let me give you an example of how the West would have treated a situation when Russia would have announced that it decided to punish Saudi Arabia for razing Yemen to the ground and killing innocent civilians, and it's going to strike their air bases and inviting China and Iran to join her. Imagine what would be the reaction in Washington, London, and Paris. Now, this would never happen, but I'm giving you this indication of how it is seen from Moscow, these threatening messages coming from Washington. So we have moved from Syria and the situation there to a situation when there is a possibility of a bigger war between Russia and America. And some people are even saying there's a possibility of a nuclear war. Now, I think the big question now is this. Is there a security system in the world, or are there countries in the world that are prepared to help resolve this very serious crisis? Or are we going to see this brinkmanship coming from Western countries, from Western capitals, which offers an absolutely horrific scenario? And Syria at the moment is of no importance to these people in London, Paris, and Washington.
Right.
They are playing a completely different game for their completely different political agendas.
Paolo, what is your reading of the situation? We see a situation here which, as Alexander has just pointed out, is fraught with risks which could escalate to a nuclear exchange.
Well, look, all kinds of things are possible, of course, but I wouldn't go that far. And everybody understands that the issue here is not a country attacking another country or people getting killed. Here, the issue is the use of illegal, unlawful chemical weapons.
Yeah.
That is the issue. It's a matter of principle. The red line that was drawn in the sand by President Obama and then was not respected. And last year, indeed, President Trump, maybe it was just a symbolic reaction. He took action when it was alleged, or at least it seemed to be proven, that President Assad had resorted to use of chemical weapons. The idea that this is going to escalate to an all-out confrontation, and this is really about the US and Russia, look, you can take that angle. I don't think so. My real question is, if the West symbolically reacts against this chemical attack and the United States, in conjunction with Paris and London, does something, then what? In other words, is it going to be an all-out war against Assad, trying to dislodge him, and in that case, creating certainly strategic concerns for Russia, which is an ally of Assad, or is it just going to be another one-off attack, a strike to say, okay, you did bad, and we punish you, and then we go home? This is really the concern that I think one should have. In other words, is this part of a general framework of looking at the Syrian conflict with new eyes, or is this just a limited reaction to the breaking of international law by the usage of chemical weapons? That's really the question. I don't know that we have the answer for that yet.
Right. Kaveh Afrasiabi, there appears to be a question mark, as Ammar Waqqaf pointed out, over the credibility of these reports of a chemical weapons attack taking place there. Iran is deeply involved in Syria. Israel is involved in Syria. In fact, Israel has said that it will not tolerate an Iranian presence, military presence, that is, in Syria. Could we see this escalate into a wider conflict in the area?
Well, first of all, as an Iranian, I wish that these Western governments had the same stated, professed principles and drew the red lines when Saddam Hussein attacked Iran with chemical weapons, not just Iranians, the Kurds also, and there were upwards of 60,000 casualties in Iran alone of those chemical attacks without even a whisper of opposition and outrage by the US and other highbrow Western officials at the United Nations. And we're really seeing a reenactment of very familiar Western hypocrisy and duplicity here, about to take military action on suspected, not certain chemical attack, and prior to the dispatch of the chemical weapon experts who are due to arrive in Duma next Tuesday. So to preempt their trip and their discovery, this imminent attack is planned. And just like last year, when there was a short-footed assumption of the Syrian government's complicity leading to 59 Tomahawk missiles being fired, and then 2 months ago, U.S. Defense Secretary Mattis readily admitted that they still have no evidence pinning the blame on Damascus. And I respectfully, fully disagree with your guest in Washington. Maybe he has stayed in Washington too long to adopt these outright blatant lies for lame excuse for war and violation of international norms and principles, and attacking another country without provocation, without UN authorization. This is simply outrageous what we are seeing unfolding before our very eyes. And Israel already has escalated this with its aggression against Syria, and Iranians have vowed to retaliate. Right. And so Israel, it's somewhat like the 1950s invasion of Egypt, a neo-colonial adventure that will definitely backfire on them.
Paolo, you want to respond to that?
Well, look, as I said, if indeed those who claim that Syria is responsible claim to have the evidence that they are responsible. I go by what I hear, and again, the use of chemical weapons is against international law. Right. there are conflicts and conflicts, and then there are escalations of conflicts into areas that are illegal. I fully appreciate what the guest from London is saying, that there have been other instances, and certainly Saddam Hussein qualifies, and it's true. At the time, nobody said anything. And again, I'm not saying that that was right. But two wrongs don't make something better. In other words, if what Saddam Hussein at the time did was condoned, it's not a good argument for saying, okay, well then it's okay. Then if Assad does the same thing as we did in the case of Saddam Hussein,
why would Assad do that? Assad was winning in Duma. This is complete rationalization, hogwash. I'm sorry, it's just so.
All right, Kaveh, I'll get back to you in a moment.
Just 1 second. Yeah. So basically, I have a different concern that this is pro forma. In other words, that because President Trump has reacted last year to a similar incident, now for public relations reasons, quite frankly, he feels compelled to do the same thing. Otherwise, he said, hey, wait a minute, you reacted last year and not this year. Why is this different? Is this the same thing? My concern, looking at this strategically, is that the United States doesn't really have a strategy about Syria, and a one-off attack or retaliation against the government of Syria, even if this time would be in conjunction with France and Britain, unlike last year, doesn't really change anything. Yeah, you may destroy a couple of air bases, destroy a few airplanes, and then you go home and you say, okay, there you go, you've been punished, and then things continue exactly as before. So I don't see that as transformative, as impactful in the broader context of the Syrian conflict, which is complicated enough.
Ammar Waqqaf, it seems one of the key questions here, and it raises a question of evidence. What kind of evidence have we seen of a chemical attack here? What can you tell us about this particular area, Duma, and why is it so difficult to find solid evidence of a chemical attack, if indeed one took place?
Well, this is the point. We don't know exactly whether a chemical attack took place, and if so, we don't know who carried it out. Jaish al-Islam, the Islamic militant group that was ousted from Duma, possess chlorine gas. They used chlorine gas in Sheikh Maqsood in Aleppo on the 7th of April 2016. There's a video with a huge plume of yellow smoke that everybody can see on the internet. And after this attack, they acknowledged that one of their commanders up north used an unauthorized weapon. So not only they've used it, but they've also acknowledged usage. So they clearly have chemical weapons, and they don't care much about the people of Duma, otherwise they would have solved the problem long time ago. So it could be them, instigating a NATO, call for NATO, let's come and bomb the Syrian government. But I would like to second the opinion of Mr. Alexander in London regarding that this has got nothing to do with Syria. This is not about the chemical attack. Nobody's waiting for the OPCW team to come up with any conclusions at all. This is about the United States and its allies trying to stop a sort of recess in influence, basically because they bet on the wrong horse in the Syrian crisis. This is as much about Ukraine, as much about the Donbass, as much about the Baltic states as it is about Syria. This is about trying to stop an increasing influence of Russia in an area, which is the Middle East, that is so vital for these states. Traditional allies of the United States, Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, are now visiting Moscow and talking to Moscow much more than they are visiting Washington and talking to Washington. And this is alarming, and the United States need to reassert authority. Whether there is a chemical attack, whether they throw flowers at them, it's really irrelevant.
Okay, Paolo, very quickly.
Just very quickly, I respectfully disagree. Just a few days ago, President Trump has said unequivocally that the United States is out of Syria. We have to go out. We've done our mission, according to him at least, was to defeat ISIL. That mission is essentially accomplished, and it's time to leave. He said this publicly and repeatedly. Therefore, the idea that the United States is trying to desperately to cling on and to stay in Syria and to find excuses to escalate the conflict and try to prolong the American presence is just not confirmed by U.S. policy in the last couple of years, and certainly not what the president has said in the last few days.
It's not about American presence. It's about carrying out strikes. They can carry out strikes in Yemen without being present. They can carry out strikes on Sudan without being present. It's about
that doesn't change anything.
Right.
That does not change anything.
Of America to strike whatever they like. That's it.
Okay, let me go to Alexander. Alexander, events are moving very quickly. The rhetoric has already escalated. We have the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She is blaming Russia for this chemical attack and says it's Russia's support for the Assad government that has led to this chemical attack. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Russia could stop this senseless slaughter if it wanted. But it stands with the Assad regime and supports without any hesitation. What's the point of trying to shame such people? After all, no civilized government would have anything to do with Assad's murderous regime. Pictures of dead children mean little to governments like Russia, who expend their own resources to prop up Assad. And this council, which saw these pictures last year, has failed to act because Russia has stood in its way every single time.
It seems there, Alexander, that the blame is going to Russia. We've seen no proof, of course, and as we've just heard, we don't even know whether an attack did take place.
Well, I think we are witnessing the same pattern all over again, starting with Iraq, then moving to Libya, then basically Ukraine. Afghanistan is sort of somewhere there as well. And the same lies are told all over again. People with no shame accuse Russia without any evidence whatsoever. It is very difficult to talk to people like that, to debate with them, because they don't listen to reason. So what can you say in response to the American officials who blatantly lie to the public, to the UN, and so on? So the only way that this can be resolved is this has to be behind-the-scenes discussions, and I think it's time for Russia to remind America that it's a nuclear superpower, that this conflict, which I don't agree with the idea, oh, it will never get out of control, it's not about Russia and America, and the war becoming regional and then even international and so on. Yes, it's exactly what it is about. America has a government that has no strategy, no idea what it's doing. Its president forgets that what he says is counting in all other capitals. Right. You know, he still thinks he's probably, you know, a TV host or a property developer. He doesn't even consider what the, you know, the consequences can be of him threatening Syria and Russia with missiles. Can you believe what is going on? And yet we hear all these, well, it's nothing serious, you know, oh, they use new chemical weapons. We have no proof, but it must be Assad was winning. Why would he use chemical weapons? Why would a winner who is kicking out all these terrorists, why would he use chemical weapons?
All right.
This has to stop. This is insanity.
Kaveh, you know, we've heard from our colleagues here that this could be a wider conflict between the United States and Russia, the battlefield being Syria in this instance. But to what extent could this also be an attempt to bloody the nose of Iran? Iran, not a friend of the Israelis, not a friend of the United States. In fact, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports that Israel is on high alert for a possible Iranian strike.
Well, again, I like to look at the broader picture here, which is that we are on the verge of a very potentially catastrophic war that could involve two military nuclear superpowers with unintended consequences, and that clearly dwarfs any kind of, you know, on the side marginal clash between Iran and Israel. So we need to focus on the main picture, which is that you know, this very careless, casual approach to instigating war and launching a unilateral strike by the U.S. and with its Western allies, that could trigger a Russian response and then spiral out of control very easily, involving nuclear weapons. And how can we afford to be relaxed about it and not to be dead terrified and scared of this very imminent danger lying ahead in a day or two in front of us.
All right.
And, you know, to me, that seems to be like the ultimate gullibility to adopt the tweet of a mindless U.S. president who reverses himself the next day, reminding us of George Bush, who said we're not into nation building, and then went and pulverized Iraq, and we know the consequences. We need to really wake up. The international community needs to wake up and put a stop to this madness.
Paolo, to the point about the response from Russia to these threats that are coming from the United States, the Russians are taking the threats very seriously. Let's listen to what the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, had to say. Let's watch this.
You are very good at threatening, and the threats you are proffering, that you are now stating vis-à-vis Syria, should make us seriously worried, all of us, because we could find ourselves on the threshold of some very sad and serious events. I would once again ask you, once again beseech you, to refrain from the plans that you're currently developing for Syria.
The Russians are taking this very seriously.
Again, sure, of course, Russia would do politically and diplomatically whatever it can to avoid this. And to the extent that it can sow divisions and break whatever front America may be able to create a united front, which, by the way, may include countries in the Middle East. These are some of the rumors circulating that others may participate beyond France and the UK, although there's nothing official on this. But so here's the thing. Last year, there was this attack, or at least alleged attack, and retaliation. What happened after that? Nothing. Okay, let's be frank. Nothing. Not a thing. There was no World War III, no nuclear war, no nothing. This is going to be, at least in the attempts of this administration, I'm not defending it, I'm just trying to analyze it and understand it, trying to say, okay, we reacted last year, we better do the same thing this year. And if we can do this in coordination with some of the other allies, well, this gives us a little more punch. Is this really an escalation to World War III? I mean, anything can happen, but I don't find this a necessary conclusion that this is the way it's going to be. And again, I do not believe, based on what I see, that the United States has really any strategic ambitions in Syria in order to maintain, a strong presence there after this.
Ammar Waqqaf, I've just got 40 seconds. What kind of damage could a strike do to the Syrian government forces?
It shouldn't do much, really. But let me reiterate one thing. The scenery last year was quite different. The United States came to Russia and said, we're going to bomb this place. Please take your personnel out. Today, we see Russia counter-threatening. They are having high alert in their, for example, Black Sea Fleet. Task force that is situated in Tartus has been deployed to the sea. They're jamming US drones. They're clearly a confrontational situation. It's not like last year.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of military movements in that part of the world. But we're going to have to leave it there for now. We've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. Chat with us about this or any other show on Twitter. We're at CGTN America, or visit us on Facebook. That's at facebook.com/CGTN America. I'm Arun Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.